Okay, it's 2 o'clock. We'll go ahead and call this February 21st meeting of the Salina Planning Commission to order. Kai, can you confirm that the Kansas Open Meeting Act protocols have been met?
I can confirm that the packet was posted and the required notice of the meeting was provided.
Thank you. Roll call.
I'm going to go ahead and call roll here. Commissioner Farber. Commissioner Ivy.
Here.
Commissioner Waters.
Here.
Commissioner Alt.
Here.
Commissioner Olson. Chair Mike Sell.
Here.
So we currently have 6 appointed commission members. 4 constitutes a majority of that membership. So we have a quorum and have provided notice of today's meeting so we can proceed with today's agenda.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to look at the minutes?
Yep. I'd move that the minutes for the January 31st meeting be approved as printed.
I second that.
Moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the January 31st meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. New business, Dean?
Under new business, we have a carried over public hearing item, and that item has to do with a series of applications that has been filed by Beck's Hybrid Seeds. And we have advertised an initial public hearing in December, but then we have continued the public hearing on that item to allow some discussions between Beck's and a property owner that owns property directly to the west of the Ohio site that's the subject of the application on your agenda. So I might call on Mr. Mays, who's representing those applications, just to give you an update on those acquisition negotiations, whether they've reached a conclusion, and to confirm that we're back to this original site. So I'd just have Mr. Mays give you a quick update on those negotiations and where we stand with those.
Chair and Commissioners, Jeff Mays, Compro Realty, 157 South 7th. This has been postponed, and I appreciate your patience in tolerating it to be on the agenda and not come forward. That's all been in the name of trying not to waste staff's time and or this public hearing time. We have failed to be able to really get where we needed to be to secure the property. That happening would, obviously, we would tear this application up and move. The buildings would then move to the west would be the plan. We've been unable, through a couple different deadlines, to secure that contract or we thought we'd come to an agreement a couple times, but we've just been unable to get there. The Beck family, because time is money in our world, and the Beck family's asked that we go ahead and proceed with the application as it was originally presented on the DK Farm and Ranch. So happy to answer any questions that I'm able, but that's why it was continually postponed, is we didn't want to come before you and waste your time, but we've not heard from the seller, so we've asked to proceed.
Thank you.
So where that left staff was we got word of that, but right as we were getting your packet out, we didn't think that was fair to you or to the applicant or staff. We couldn't really pull together all the information that was needed back for the original site. So what we would suggest is that the chair open the public hearing, see if there's any people who are following the case have any comment. If any commissioners have questions of staff or Mr. Mays that they want to make sure gets addressed on the meeting on the 7th, you could let us know that. But our recommendation would be that items 3.1 A, B, and C, dealing with the rezoning, the site plan, and the plat for Beck's Hybrid Seeds, be continued to the March 7th agenda, and that would allow us to prepare full reports and analysis of those. We've got some good graphics here that we can share with you there that would paint the picture, but we just feel that time is best served if we could have time to paint the complete picture for you. So, but if there's anything from what you've seen or what you've heard that you want to make sure that we address on the 7th, you should let us know if you see anything.
Is there anybody from the audience that would like to comment on this motion?
We do not have anyone from the public on Zoom right now.
Okay. That being heard, do I need could I have a motion to move this item to the agenda for March 7th?
I'd move that item to the agenda for March 7th meeting.
And a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to move this public hearing item to March 7th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries.
Okay, so we'll provide you much more detailed information about this project on the 7th, and we'll look forward to seeing Mr. Mays there to help us paint the picture. So,
Thank you.
Yep.
thanks, Jeff. We have a second public hearing item on today's agenda, and that is an application filed by CKF Addiction Treatment Incorporated, and they have a contract to purchase the former Dunbar Elementary School building and currently the offices of St. Francis Community Services, and they have filed an application to unify the zoning of this property by rezoning the west half from what is currently I-2 light industrial to C1 restricted business, which would make the entire parcel zone C1. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Hers, and he'll give you an overview of that, and hopefully we'll explain why we think it's split zoning between I-2 and C1.
Yes, thank you. So the situation we're dealing with is a little bit unique, as Mr. Andrews stated, where we have one single parcel, and that single parcel has multiple zoning designations tied to it or assigned to it. And so the aerial photo looks like this, where you have the old former Dunbar School and then 4 modular buildings all on one single parcel. But when you look at the zoning map, you'll see that the east half is C1 and the west half is I-2. And we'll get into a little bit about the nature of what that means as we go through this report real quick. So the history of this particular property, because it is a local historic landmark, the former Dunbar Elementary School, has a pretty extensive history. And as we were preparing for this report, we actually visited with the report that Mr. Berger prepared for the local designation back in 1998, in which he had like 9 pages of history that he did exceptional research for. And we felt that research was significant enough, and he did an outstanding job on that history that we typed that particular report up separate, and we're attaching this so that moving forward we have that report for any projects that might come forward in the future, and just so we don't lose that history, because it is outstanding. So we would encourage you to look at that document if you haven't already, but I'll do a kind of a brief synopsis of what that history looks like. And so this particular property is part of the original town of Salina, which was originally platted in 1862. It is the site of the former Dunbar Elementary School, which is a 2.5-story building that has both architectural significance and historical significance. The historical significance is that Dunbar Elementary School was originally established as a segregated school for elementary black children within the city of Salina under separate but equal laws sanctioned by the state legislature, as well as the 1896 U.S. Supreme Court decision case in Plessy versus Ferguson. Salina never did segregate high school, they just segregated elementary schools, but this was the segregated school that we had in the city of Salina from 1922 until its closing. It is historically significant from an architectural standpoint because it was designed by Oklahoma City architect William T. Schmidt, and that's significant for Salina because a lot of or a fair number of our historic buildings in Salina were designed by him, such as the temple okay? That is one of them, and then the Roosevelt and Lincoln schools were also designed by him, I believe. So he has some history with designing exceptional buildings that we have characterized as historically significant in Salina. So the site before the Dunbar School was a site of 10 residential dwellings, and so the site was cleared through acquisition of the properties through condemnation, and were redeveloped with the Dunbar School. When the 1954 Supreme Court case, Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka, was decided, the school district for Salina announced that all children are able to and encouraged to go to the elementary school closest to them versus being assigned specific segregated schools. And so what we see is in 1954, before the U.S. Supreme Court case, there were 108 students that enrolled at Dunbar Elementary School, and a year later in 1954, or in 1955 rather, there were just 28. So enrollment fell from 108 to 28. And so the school district decided and determined that it was no longer feasible to operate the Dunbar School as a school, and so they closed it for school use, and it remained open for meeting spaces that were occasionally used by the community, but it wasn't used to its full extent, and so the school district decided to divest of the property. And so in 1959, the St. Francis Boys Home purchased it, and it has been used by St. Francis as administrative buildings and locations for its social services ever since. So since 1954, St. Francis has used the property for their mission and operations. In February of 2014, 1977, the city of Salina did a comprehensive rezoning, and that kind of brings us to the current situation that the applicant is requesting rezoning for. So prior to 1977, the property was zoned B, which is our two-family residential zoning district, prior to the current code that we have. And when it was rezoned, the east half was zoned different than the west half. And through our research, staff has determined that we believe the reason for that is because it was anticipated that the Dunbar School would eventually become demolished and the property would be redeveloped through our Northeast Industrial Park urban renewal project that happened shortly after that 1977 rezoning. So I'll pull up a map just to give you some context of what the Northeast Industrial Park area looked like. And so it's a little bit difficult to see because it's a hashed area. Maybe the further out I go, maybe it shows up a little better. So it does a little bit better because you don't have the color aerial photo. But here's the subject property, and you can kind of see the hash marks. So this area that's south of the railroad tracks, kind of north of North Street and north of the river, this area was part of an urban renewal project that was going on in the 60s and late 70s. And this particular property, we believe, because it was in the North Industrial Improvement District area, it was presumed that a portion of the property would be redeveloped for office space or medical space, which is what we have primarily to the east, and a portion would be reused as for industrial purposes. So if we pull up a zoning map, you can kind of see that a little bit better. So this is our site here. So then, in 1998, the Heritage Commission and City Commission, they designated the former school a local landmark, again based on its architectural heritage as well as its historical significance for the city of Salina. And then in 2000, the site was revised or amended to add 4 modular structures that are there today. And that brings us to the applicant's request. They are in the process of purchasing this property from St. Francis, and they would like to use the west half, which is currently zoned I-2, for administrative purposes in the main Dunbar building, and then converting the modular units to housing for some of their clients, 24 women in total, women and children, that would have a temporary stay of 90 days in which they would have shelter and residency, as well as some social services and treatment that the applicant provides. And the I-2 district does not allow for that type of use. And so that's why the applicant is here, because the split zoning in and of itself does not prohibit continued use of the site. However, because the applicant is wanting to change how it's used, and the I-2 district does not allow for the change in use that they're proposing, they need to rezone the I-2 portion to I-1, and it also would bring the zoning district of the property under one single zoning umbrella, or one district umbrella, unifying that zoning. So again, the property that we're rezoning to, or the district we're attempting to rezone to, is the I-1 zoning district, and that is consistent with the east half, as well as the applicant's main campus, which is just across the street to the east. So the zoning district, the I-1 district, staff has looked at the existing setbacks. We've looked at the existing bulk in terms of lot coverage and things of that nature, which you can find on page 3 and 4. And the site meets all of the C1 district development standards. One of them that may come into question over time is the landscape regulations. Because the site predates the landscape regulations, which were created and adopted in 1994, it is pre-existing non-conforming as to meeting all of the landscape requirements. And what that means is they're not required to add landscaping. However, if they have a significant change to the site or a substantial improvement to the site in which they're adding 30% or more floor area, or the cost of the site improvements or renovations are 50% or more of the existing value of the buildings on site, then they would be required to meet all of the landscape regulations. So looking at the suitability of the site and the surrounding area, the property itself has been used by St. Francis since 1959, and those services, while not exactly the same as what CKF does, have some similarities in which there are administrative offices and there are social services that are offered. So it's a somewhat similar use. While it's not exactly the same, it is similar in its use and operation. So CKF owns the property to the east, and that is also zoned C1. And so under the proposed zoning district, the existing use of St. Francis would fit within the C1 district, and the proposed use of the administrative offices and accessory residential dwelling and treatment areas would also fit within that C1 district classification. Looking at the character of the neighborhood, the properties to the north and to the west are all industrial, with properties to the east being C1 and residential. So to the north you have the gray pattern, to the west you have the gray pattern, and as you go to the east you have the C1 district, which is between the I-2 on the west and then the residential district a little bit further to the east. And C1 is commonly used, it's our restricted business zoning district, and it's commonly used as a buffer or transition zone between residential districts and more intensive commercial or industrial uses, because they don't tend to generate a lot of noise, traffic, or other elements that are associated with more intense commercial industrial uses. And so the C1 district would fit the character of the existing neighborhood. And looking at the utilities and the existing infrastructure that we have on the site, we do have 2 sewer lines. So you have a 10-inch sewer line that goes north-south right underneath the existing building and between the 2 modular, or 4 modular units, I should say. And then you also have an 8-inch east-west sanitary sewer that goes in an easement right between the 4 modulars in that direction. You also have a 6-inch water line on Front Street. So there are existing infrastructure and existing utilities that are adequate to serve the area. Looking at streets and traffic, the proposed use of the applicant as a medical office and treatment area is not historically a high traffic generating use, and is quite similar to what we have existing, and is quite similar to what they have on their main building or property to the east. So staff does not believe that the proposed use will generate any additional impactful additional traffic. Looking at the comprehensive plan, the future land use map of this area identifies the property as office employment. And if we look at the employment section of the comprehensive plan, offices are considered a secondary use, and C1 zoning is a recommended zoning district that works within that. And one of the primary development criteria for secondary uses is that it be a transition zone, which is exactly what we have here, where we have industrial to the west and we have residential to the east. So the rezoning from I-2 to C1 for the property would extend or expand the buffer between those 2 uses. On page 7 and 8, I do have a list of potential findings that we've summarized that you can look at. I kind of summarize what we've gone through in our report. The Planning Commission does have 3 alternatives that we've identified as staff. The Planning Commission could recommend approval of the applicant's request for C1 zoning for the west half of the property, provided that the appropriate findings can be made to support that zoning change. The Planning Commission could recommend that consideration of the application be postponed if they feel additional information is needed. And the Planning Commission could recommend denial of the applicant's rezoning request if you do not feel that sufficient findings are made to justify their requested zoning change. So what we would recommend is option 1, because we do feel that the proposed C1 zoning is compatible with the surrounding area and would be a suitable zoning district for both how the property is being used now and how the applicant is proposing to use it in the future. And with that, we'll take any questions that you might have.
Questions of staff? None being heard, would the applicant care to address the commission? Your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, my name is Shane Hudson, 2547 Aberdeen Lane, Salina, Kansas. I'm the CEO of CKF Addiction Treatment. I appreciate you all having us, Chair and Commissioners. Currently, we have a program that we're providing services at Ashby's campus, so Ashby House here in town. We took over providing that program in February of 2020. We currently have 24 beds available. Typically, you're seeing up to 20 adult women in that program for 90 days and 0 to 5 children. So it's for women and women with children for a 90-day period. Free housing is provided while women attain healthcare services, so specifically addiction treatment services, case management services, access to community resources, and also partnerships with St. Francis and the Mental Health Center to provide mental health services and child and adult services to those patients. We're moving that program to extend our current campus and really utilize staff more efficiently and effectively and provide more care to women. 2 of those modular buildings will move the current program and its existing capacity to the new site. The other two buildings, our plan is over time to hopefully double the capacity of that program to create more of a regional hub and transportation mechanisms to get women to care within Salina and the surrounding areas. So upfront is just getting the existing program moved to the new location, and long-term, we hope to double the capacity of the program. And I will take any questions that you have.
Any questions of the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Bring the item back to the board for discussion.
I can confirm that we don't have anyone on Zoom or in the public or from the public that has comments on this.
Thank you, Dustin. Any discussion? Appear ready to make a motion?
I'd move that we approve application Z 23-1 to change the zoning to C1 for that area for CKF.
Is there a second?
I second.
Been moved and seconded to approve application Z 23-1. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Good job. Legislative matters.
We do not have any legislative matters or text amendments coming forward at this time. We're working on a couple of things with our code enforcement staff that we may bring to see if you wish to initiate some changes. We have no administrative items or preliminary discussion items for you this afternoon. In terms of other business, the consumer fireworks storage text amendment will go before the City Commission on the 27th of this month or next Wednesday. They'll review your recommendation and consider if they want to adopt an ordinance making that change. And then on the 7th, as we already mentioned, we have the Beck's hybrid seeds coming back to you, and we have a cleanup item. If you'll recall, I think right before the end of the year, we had a rezoning request to confirm, to change the former Town and Country Vet Clinic to a beauty salon. And what we learned was that the property that was acquired and is part of the zoning lot for that was slightly larger than what we presented and were led to believe. And so we're just bringing that back to have you consider expanding the boundary of the plan for that to incorporate all the property. There's some property to the east of the clinic that it was larger than originally presented in terms of what the applicants actually purchased. And so we would just bring that back to clean up that boundary. And then on the 21st of March, we do have an application filed for final plat of the Phase 2 of the River Run area. They have now renamed that Overlook Estates, and so that is tentatively scheduled to come back before you in the form of a final plat on the 21st. And so I know spring break fits in there somewhere, but we do anticipate having meetings on both meeting dates in March. And so that's what we're seeing coming up for the month of March.
Thank you. Public forum, do we have anybody in the audience or online that wants to comment?
We do not have anyone online currently.
Okay, I'd entertain a motion for adjournment.
I move we adjourn our meeting.
Second.
Moving to second to adjourn the meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None being heard, motion carries. Thank you.